Hey there, this is Pat Ennis of Ennis Legacy Partners. Welcome to the Exit Readiness Podcast. I'm here with my co-host Walter Dial, CPA and tax partner at GRF CPAs and Advisors in Bethesda, Maryland. And our mission here on the podcast is to provide you, the business owner, with subject matter expertise on topics pertaining to building transferable or sellable business value, and then helping you plan your eventual and inevitable exit from your business. We want to help you build a business that is transferable or sellable, and then exit successfully on your own terms and conditions. Walter, in focusing, as we do, on building sellable or transferable value, we at times have referred to management systems such as EOS, Scaling Up, the Value Builder System. And this morning, we're going to focus on another, which has a very interesting backstory or history, OKRs, or objectives and key results.
Yeah, it does have a fascinating history, Pat, and I'm looking forward to our podcast today because I'm really pretty unfamiliar with how this is going to, how this works in the real world. But the history is very fascinating. And, it goes back to Peter Drucker, kind of the godfather of modern management. And he had the whole idea of managing by objectives. And then Andy Grove, who was a CEO of Intel, he kind of took Drucker's management by objectives and added the concept of key results. And as a result, OKRs were born. And then Andy Grove, I guess, is kind of known as the father of the OKR framework. And then Silicon Valley got involved. So in 1999, John Doerr, who was a Silicon Valley venture capitalist, he was actually on the management team at Intel with Andy Grove. So he was familiar with OKRs. He became an investor and advisor to Google. And John introduced the OKR system to the management people at Google, who then used it. At that time, their company was only 30 people. They started using the system. And to this day, it's an ingrained part of the Google culture. And the founders have even credited OKR for the incredible growth of Google. So it has a very fascinating history. And if Google is an endorsement for it, I think it's something our listeners should be very interested in.
Yeah, absolutely. Great story. And clearly, as you just pointed out, a great third-party endorsement in Google. They've done all right for themselves. I mean,
yeah,
they put this in place when they had 30 employees, and they're still doing it. So that our listeners may not be the size of Google yet, but if they listen to today's podcast and start to implement what my buddy Tim has to say, maybe they'll get to be Google in short order. And that's our topic today, then, building sellable value through the use of OKRs, or objectives and key results. And our guest is my friend Tim Meinhardt, who leads a team of OKR experts in serving enterprises of all sizes, from startups to publicly traded companies. Tim's the president and CEO of Atruity, one of the world's leading providers of enterprise OKR implementations. And currently, Atruity is directly involved in facilitating OKR programs with organizations with combined annual revenue of $7+ billion. That's billion with a B. He speaks globally about the topic. He has a podcast, OKRs and A Podcast. And it's in that context that he often interviews and discusses the topic of OKRs with thought leaders and experts from around the world. And so he's been, like us, he's been doing this kind of work for a long time, 17 years or more. He's acted as a CEO, a COO, a CFO, probably any kind of O you can think of, with several different organizations. And so it's great to have you, Tim. Welcome to the podcast, my friend.
Well, Pat, thank you. And Walter, thank you for having me today. Exciting topic.
Yeah, well, it is. And so that history that we were reviewing with the listeners at the outset, did we miss anything? Did we get it right?
Well, you all both should sell for me a little bit. And that was pretty comprehensive. I was turned on to Measure What Matters by actually my first client, which was the Red Hat North American public sector. A gentleman by the name of Paul Smith said, Tim, we want you to implement this methodology inside our organization, and I need you to read this book so that you can be able to do that. And that was my first foray into objectives and key results. And I wasn't 35 minutes into the book where I stood up and told my wife, I said, this book is unbelievably great. And the more I read it, the more I continued to be enthralled with it and became completely consumed with objectives and key results. And I think it's a fabulous methodology and a goal-setting management system that can be used by organizations both large and small.
Okay, so let's start then here at the outset with the basics, if you will. Just provide listeners with a general overview or description of what OKR is and how it works.
Sure. So OKRs is a very short acronym for objectives and key results. Objectives are what it is that you'd like to accomplish, and the key results are how are we going to measure whether we've accomplished that or not. OKRs for short, but when we put this in, we ask folks that are involved in this that they actually become educated a little bit on this. Management systems are what they are. There are pyramids, there's triangles, there's you name it. There's complex words that mean many different things. And in the OKR world, or objectives and key results, the first thing I always ask people is do yourself a favor, grab or read a book or two about it. And there are two wonderful books, and I'll share this with your audience. The first one is Measure What Matters by John Doerr. It's terrific. It's very in-depth, and yet you get a very, very good understanding of what objectives and key results are and how this whole management method was developed through Intel and then through Google. There's another book on the marketplace called Radical Focus, and actually Christina Wadke has just released a new one on Radical Focus. But both books are excellent, and this is for the smaller business person. I think it's great because she has a fable that she tells about a startup company and how they begin to lose their way, and they have two people involved in it, and they get started and they realize that they need to do a pivot here and there, and but one person pivots and the other one doesn't necessarily want to pivot, and it goes through all of the trials and tribulations of a startup, and yet they then bring in this OKR expert, which begins to get them organized. And I actually use some of the principles today in our practice that they speak to. But those two books are a great way to get started. There are also some excellent videos on the internet that you should take a look at as well. I will give a shameless plug to Atruity1.com. If you go to our resources page, there are a couple wonderful videos on there that will also give you a good understanding of what objectives and key results are. And Pat, the thing that I love about OKRs is its simplicity, and yet most of these management systems that are put in, they fail, and they fail for very, very similar reasons. When I started Atruity, I really was curious. I had a woman who was advising me, and she said, well, Tim, you better find out why these things fail. And I looked at her and my eyes kind of crossed, and I said, what do you mean fail? And then I thought, wow, I really do need to know why these programs fail. And just to briefly to your audience, they fail for very similar reasons, and I'll share them with you. And as smaller organizations, which you're involved in, this even hits home a little bit more. And the first one is, if you can imagine this, that it's a bad plan, okay? It wasn't conceived properly. That guarantees a fail. Number two, it was done by one person. Imagine that. One person says, I got a great idea for the company. This is what we're going to do. Recipe for disaster, they fail. Number three, which is really, really one of the cornerstones for a successful program, is buy-in throughout the organization. If you don't have buy-in, more than likely any plan that you put in place is going to fail. You're going to have naysayers. You're going to have people that just really aren't into it. It's management concept of the month, so to speak. And unless you can get those people bought in, your plan will fail. And there are many strategies around how to do that. The fourth issue is visibility. I remember the days when we did our planning, and people that I talked to about planning for a company that I owned, which seems like forever ago. And, they would say, oh, I've got a plan. It's right here in my drawer. Okay. Now it might be, oh, it's in my shared file. I got to go find it. We did it earlier this year. If a plan is not visible and not in front of everybody, more than likely it's going to fail, and it fail quickly. But if you've done it all right and you've gotten to this last point, this one is absolutely cruel. But believe it or not, you mismanage it. And think about that. You've done everything right, and yet for some reason you've gotten busy, or the company's in a crunch period, and you say, okay, fine, we'll get to it. We couldn't make that particular meeting. We didn't set it up right. And through those small things of mismanagement, your plan will ultimately fail. So when you get started with OKRs, the real trick is how to do it, how to implement it. The books will tell you what it is, but the how is what's really, truly important.
Yeah. So you mentioned simplicity, and simplicity is a very important concept for the owners that Walter and I are working with, because their businesses, they're 50 million and under in revenue, and most of them are under 15 million in revenue. And so
Right.
life's complicated already.
Well, yeah, I always said the hardest hire is the first hire. So if you've made it past that point, and you've made it to that certain level where you are in today's world, I espouse to something called keeping it simple, stupid, the KISS theory. The more you can continue to KISS things, I think the better off you are. Complexity is very hard to remember. Simplicity is easy to remember. And you and I were talking offline. I think I'll just dig into this a little bit. We were talking about some of the other, management systems that are out there in the marketplace today, EOS being one, another one called Rockefeller Habits, or Scaling Up. And so how do they compare and contrast to OKRs? And I think the easiest, the high level view is that OKRs are just more simplistically based. But if you want to know, EOS is essentially, it's designed to be a complete operating system for your business. So there are many things that you need to do and put into place in order to make this accomplishable. And yet OKRs, they're a little bit more flexible, and it's kind of a standalone framework of sorts. Now, it actually can work inside of the EOS platform if given those opportunity to use good pieces from one and good pieces from another. The other thing about EOS is versus OKRs, I would call it timeframes. I think OKRs are a little more flexible in their timeframes. And then thirdly, I would talk a little bit maybe about the audience of sorts. I go back to that simplistic nature, but if you like complex, if you like things very, very detail oriented, then I think both OKR or both EOS program and the Rockefeller Habits are a little more complex. I mean, Rockefeller gets all the way down to cash management, which, look, for some organizations, that's really important. So you can pick and choose certain elements of this, but there are commonalities that are very important. And it's making sure that everybody has a clear understanding of the mission of the organization, critically clear, okay? If you don't know where you want to go, any road will take you there. So we work very hard with companies to make sure that they have a mission statement. In my research, I found that organizations, and this was, I couldn't believe this, but they said in orders of magnitude, organizations that have a mission statement And you could say mission, vision, you could write culture in there, but they have those higher level thoughts articulated to the organization. And then they have their long-term objectives established. Those organizations are much more likely to succeed and get people to be much more efficient in how they're chasing what's most important in their daily activities. And then the other one is, I'll just say the other commonality is how we're going to get there, and then when we want to get there. So those are the commonalities between them. But my personal belief is that the objectives and key results methodology is a little simpler. And I just listened to a podcast yesterday. I'm also a podcast listener to this woman, Christina Woodkey. Again, she was interviewed by whatmatters.com. And sometimes you listen and you pick little things up. And she said, the power of one was really important to her. And when you think about it, OKRs really ask you to focus. What's the most important one or two or three things that the organization needs to accomplish, and by how, and by when? But she even broke it down and said, sometimes just having one purpose, singular purpose that we need to focus on as an organization will drive that organization to success. And, when you speak about value for a business, I have to tell you that I think that when you do sell your business, and I'm going to probably get out of my swim lane a little bit here, but it would seem to me that having something that you could easily show somebody on what it is and how you drive your business would be a value add for your business as you continue to move forward and ultimately want to be able to exit. You're either a hub or a spoke in this world, and most of the businesses are spokes. And so if you could show them something that they could actually use for the other parts of their business, I think that would be of unique value. And I think OKRs are somewhat universal, Pat. They don't really, they're not necessarily for the startup. They're not necessarily for the enterprise or for a publicly traded company, but they fit all of them in their own way, shape, or form. And they do that through this ability to really focus and align an organization on what's most important and what do we need to accomplish. We've just been through, arguably in our lifetime, the single greatest business disruptor that they'll be writing books on for years, which was this COVID effect that we've all had to endure, live with, and some of us loved ones. And it was a very challenging time for business. But imagine if your business did not have some type of management system in place and didn't have the ability to be agile, to change the way they were doing business during this COVID as it began, and it came like a freight train. If everybody remembers, I remember in February talking to people and saying, gosh, this isn't good. And then to my heart's dismay, they canceled the NCAA March Madness basketball tournament. And at that point, from there on, things began to unravel. And as a business, if you didn't have something in place, you were in trouble. And you needed to be agile enough because your strategy was going to change. And I think that's where keeping it simple and having that focus quarter after quarter on what's most important now as it relates to our overall strategy, our changes in strategy as a result of catastrophic conditions, allow organizations to thrive when others did not.
Tim, let me ask you something. So from an implementation standpoint, is this something that's done at the company level and then also at like department level, or how's that work?
Yeah, Walter, great question, and thank you. First, I'll go to the buy-in scenario. So we'll kind of look at this through the eyes of buying in. So what we normally recommend is let's have the basics squared away. Okay, let's make sure that there's a mission statement. They've got long-term objectives squared away. Then we work real hard with the organization to say, what is it that we need to get accomplished over the next year? Okay, and we work to develop what is the 2 or 3 major objectives for the organization over that year, and then how would we measure whether those are successful or not? Then we break that down to the quarter. Okay, great. So now what do we've got to get done this quarter? And this is where the magic starts to happen, is because we've broken it down to the quarter. Okay, what's important and how are we going to measure this? Then we work with every single department lead. So everybody in the company, with sales, IT, marketing, operations, customer support, legal, HR, however large the organization. And some people wear two hats. Okay. So then we begin to say, look, this is what the organization wants to be able to get done. And hopefully some of these people have done this with the owners or the stakeholders, because that's part of that buy-in mentality that, you want to empower people to be able to have, the ability to help make those decisions, because now first they've got their name on it. They've said that's what's most important. So then we break it down to them and say, okay, fine. What are you doing? Okay. Do you have just one particular issue that, is most important for your particular organization as it relates to those overall quarterly objectives and key results for the company? Now, you can theoretically say, okay, fine, we're all going to keep the same objectives. And then what are you doing from a key result perspective in each one of those areas as well? Once that's established, that's generally your set for the first quarter. When we actually engage an organization, whether they're large or small, we'll do this for them in less than 30 days. So we make sure that everyone's educated. We go through an exhaustive procedure of making sure everyone understands their role and responsibility. And then there's one element of this is who's running this thing. That's a big deal. Even in smaller organizations, who's in charge of this? Because they have a responsibility themselves to make sure things are done promptly, they're done consistently. I have a wonderful book. If anyone would go to my website, you can download it for free, called The 7 C's for OKR Success. And it talks about those 7 C's: consistency, communication, so on and so forth. But so Walter, you want to take your time with it. Now, and I do that for the first quarter. So once we're done, we'll reset for the next quarter. Now, if you want to add people from there, terrific. If you feel as an owner that maybe this didn't, maybe there's still naysayers, or we really struggle with it a little bit and it's uncomfortable at first. Look, it's like anything that you do is uncomfortable at first, but go through the discomfort, because you'll find that it is a very easy, management system, but you learn how to do it a little bit. So that's what I would recommend, Walter. And then you can kind of break it down if there's a next layer of management, and then you can break it all the way down to the individual as well. But I always like to say, give it a quarter, 2 or 3 to get it rolling.
And from a communication standpoint, do you recommend that a company share the goals or the objectives and how they're doing quarter by quarter with everybody in the company? Or
yeah, I do. And if there's something that's extraordinarily confidential, obviously no. But you want people, what you want to do is publish, make sure everybody knows, hey, this is our mission. This is our long-term objective. This is what we're doing this quarter, or this year and this quarter, because what they want to know in today's society, what's really, really interesting is we're an information society now. We're hiring, we interview, we want to get good quality people. We want self-thinkers. We want people to be, given that freedom to choose how they want to be able to make something happen. And, talent is a big deal in today's world. And people want to know that they're having input. And what my parents didn't know was, how did they matter to the overall success of the business? So what OKRs bring is that visibility. So the quick answer is yes, you want to be able to share this. How did we do? How are we doing? I have an organization that we run on PowerPoint presentations. So imagine everyone has a PowerPoint slide. So anyone can see everybody's slide and what everybody's doing. And so that transparency is what, at first it seems a little intimidating. I will tell you that, Walter, well, gosh, everyone's going to know what I'm doing. Well, that's where the alignment comes in. Not only, we always think traditionally of alignment, which is more vertical, in sales, we're all aligned or whatever. But realistically, the magic of OKRs is that alignment horizontally between different departments, because they realize Sometimes people may be doing the same thing, or they can coordinate a little bit differently. And you get a greater sense of what everybody else is doing collectively for the greater good of the organization. So it's a big deal.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And do you find that as part of the overall program, the company ends up maybe changing their compensation plans in a way that incentivizes employees to be able to go out and, reach these objectives, or that's not really part of it?
So, and that's a great question too. I don't like, and I don't think you should tie compensation to your OKR program. It's okay if you want to be able to use elements for a conversation, but what you want to do with objectives and key results is ask people to do more than they think they can do. Stretch a little bit, a stretch goal or a stretch target. If we thought we could do 5, what if we did 7? What would that look like? And it's the ability to try and, I hate to use the word fail forward, but, the greatest thing we can do is be a learning organization. What are we learning to do? What can we do better? Who said 5 was the most? It could be 8, could be 10. Maybe we have to innovate to get that 10, and then what that would look like. But think of the results that would happen if we could hit 10. So if we tried real hard and we only hit 6, was it a fail? You want to be able to give people that room to stretch and reach. We call it reaching for Mars. And if you hit the moon, that's pretty doggone good. So, but the short answer is no, I would not tie it to compensation. You're having hopefully consistent conversations through your management team on their objectives and key results throughout the quarter. And it's those conversations where you should be able then to look from a compensation perspective on whether someone's performing their job as well.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah, maybe we can have you back another time to talk more about that piece, Tim, because I don't know. I think I would have a different perspective on that. I think that tying comp to everything that OKRs is incentive comp to everything OKRs are looking to accomplish could absolutely help the company or the owners achieve their goals. But you know what? We're going to wrap up here. Building a business, listeners, that is transferable or sellable absolutely requires a management system that has organizational clarity around mission, vision, and values, has strategic goals or objectives that can be measured and are measured, and there's a system that helps to measure the results of those strategic goals. And then there's accountability. And we believe that it's the simpler, the better, particularly for smaller businesses. And so the simpler to implement it, the greater chance for sustainability and success of the management system. And so if you want to maximize your options for exit, then you're going to build a business that's transferable or sellable, and you're going to have some kind of management system in place, be it EOS or one of the others. But OKRs, and Tim has just done a tremendous job here of outlining exactly what it is and how to implement it and the differentiation. And one of the differentiators is its simplicity, it seems, in implementing it comparatively. And so we would encourage you to check it out as a potential management system for your business and consider whether or not it's the right solution for you. We think it could be because it is simple to implement. Okay, Tim, any closing, anything that you want to mention here as we close that we haven't talked about or asked you about to this point?
Well, I'm somebody that I would say I'm a counterpuncher. I can talk about this ad nauseum. I would encourage everybody to visit our website at Atruity1.com if they have any interest in objectives and key results. Download that book, The 7 C's for OKR Success. And to let everybody know, we work with not only very large companies, but we also work with startups. And you and I were mentioning offline that I recently just did a startup company that's probably, I'd say they're less than $5 million, and they were located in Saudi Arabia. So everybody, and they did it for simplicity's sake. So if you're interested and you'd like to know how to get started, you can reach out to us too. You can contact us at atruity1.com, and we'd be more than helpful or more than happy to help you figure this out. And we wish you all the best. And Pat and Walter, I'd like to thank you for having me today. And I look forward to future discussions.
Yeah, great.
Thanks, Tim. It's been great. Thanks for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you so much.
And listeners, if you want help in maximizing the value of your business or planning for your eventual exit, you can reach Pat at 301-859-0860, and you can reach me at 301-951-9090. You can also access resources at exitreadiness.com, grfcpa.com, and nslp.com. As always, thanks for listening. And until next time on the Exit Readiness Podcast, this is Walter Dial and Pat Ennis signing off.